Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm editor-in-chief at Fine Gardening.
Hi, I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the editorial director for Fine Gardening. And Carol, so we're going to give everybody an inside treat today that we have a cloud-based service where we put our plants and our photos and a Word document with, basically what we're going to talk about today. And you rebranded today's episode name so well, might I add. So what is the rebrand of today's episode topic?
Okay, should I say what it was before?
No, I'll say my terrible version afterwards.
So this is plants we have learned to love.
Okay, and this is the difference between me and Carol, right? Positive, great spin, makes you want to listen. My title was Plants We Used to Hate and Now We Kind of Like.
Seems a little negative. And what I realized is I don't really hate any plants. Well,
true.
I mean, I hate certain invasive species and whatnot, but yeah, like plants, every plant has a redeeming quality. If nothing else, it's making oxygen and feeding some kind of insect. But
totally. And I feel like that was so true when I started jumping into it and going, oh, I really didn't used to love this particular, genus. But now that I've gardened for a few decades more, I've come to appreciate those, maybe boring qualities that I once thought it had, or, there's been improvements upon, a particular species or cultivar that, makes it so you love it a little bit more, or even full on love it. So, all right. So plants we've learned to love. And Carol, so what was, we ideated around this a bit, but what was the first plant that jumped to mind when we decided, all right, let's do this topic?
So the first one on my list is a coneflower. Okay. And it's not that I don't like coneflowers, but I had not planted a coneflower since like the 90s.
Okay,
until this one. So the one that I recently have grown to love is called Artisan Yellow Ombre coneflower. That's Echinacea PAS 130334.
All right. Artisan Yellow?
Yes, it's called Artisan Yellow Ombre. I love, and that word ombre has entered the popular lexicon, but I learned it in art school, and it's, where a dark color fades to a lighter color. And so that is the color of this coneflower. It is not pink, like, the straight species. It's this beautiful golden color that then as the flower ages, it sort of streaks, or the tips of the petals or the center of the flowers like softer, like a butter or straw color.
Nice.
Mixed with this like really clean golden color. And what I thought of with this one is Richard Hockey, because he says, like, why would I bother with a yellow coneflower? We have Rudbeckias for that, right? That's his take on it. And I agreed, but like, this is not the same yellow as the black-eyed Susans and the brown-eyed Susans. It's not brassy. It's like more glowy, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's got, it's like toward the very end, the flowers last a really long time. And toward the end of the season, they're almost like apricot sort of colors in it. So it's a cool color. The centers also are a cool color. They start out green and then they take that same kind of like golden sort of pollen color. So I like that about it too. It's not that I don't like black-eyed Susans, but it's just a different look. Really pretty.
And that was a knock against Echinaceas kind of overarching. I mean, they're great, seed sources for birds, but when they start to fade out, especially like I'm thinking of, you said the 90s, Magnus, everybody was on to Echinacea purpurea Magnus. that looks pretty hideous as it ages. You know, it washes out, that purple washes out to like a 1980s dusty mauve. It's just not good. So the fact that, you know, this artist yellow ombre kind of, it almost seems like it enhances itself as it starts to fade.
Yeah, it stays looking good for a long time, but it does still have those seeds that the birds love. Nice. This was a 2023 All-America Selections perennial winner, and so that's where I grew it from seed. I get the All-America Selections seed collections pretty much every year, and that sort of pushes me to grow things that I wouldn't ordinarily grow. Mm-hmm. But this was it was a winner because there has to be something unique about the plant for it to get the All-American nod. So this is a F1 hybrid, and I think it might be the first F1 hybrid echinacea that's being offered.
Wow.
And the color is unique. And it's a nice size. It gets like 18 to 30 inches tall. It's 30 inches tall when it's in flower, about 30 inches wide. So it's a nice small plant too. Great for the front of the border. It's great for covering up the first half of taller perennials. Mm-hmm. Deer and rabbits seem to leave it alone, which is not the case for the rudbeckias that I have. They get their heads nipped off before you even get a single flower. And it does come quite easily from seeds. So I planted a second batch from seeds that I collected from the first batch I grew, and those aren't going to be the F1 hybrids, right? Mm. Those are offspring of the F1 hybrids, yeah. But it grows very easily from seed, and it's an affordable way to add a very attractive, long-lived perennial, multiple plants to your border. It's just you have to wait a year because it will not bloom that first year.
Yeah. Understandable. That's so cool. Wow, how fascinating. Like the first F1 hybrid echinacea. That's so cool.
I think so. I think so. I should double check that.
No, I mean,
but it is an F1 hybrid, which is unusual.
Yeah, absolutely.
For an echinacea.
How cool. And All-American Selections, they've been put to the test. Let's just put it that way. They've been put to the test.
Yeah, multiple sites across the country have grown it and given it high enough scores that it got recognized.
Yeah, which is a really, for anybody who's listening, it's a really good resource in that it is grown in many different regional areas. That is something like if you go onto, the All-American Selection site, you can click into, okay, the Mountain West. How did this perform in the Mountain West? And here's the report on the plant from your particular area, which I find pretty invaluable because especially for certain species, hey, it might have done well in more southern locations, but it's not going to do so great in the Northeast. So I think that's important as well. So plug to All-American Selections.
Absolutely.
All right, if you're a historic listener of this podcast, if you're I love when podcasts say, hey, if you're a day one listener, even if you were a day probably 153 listener, you know how hard I've come at hellebores in the past, okay? I've gotten your nasty emails. I've gotten some people who agreed with me that hellebores are overrated. I have stood on my soapbox on this podcast and said, hellebores, meh. But hear ye on, the end of September, beginning of October of 2025, I am coming around to say, I used to not love them, but now I kind of do. And here's the reason. Hellebores, I always gave them, a thumbs down because the historic classic hellebores that were planted in, the 1900s around New England they're plants that you literally have to crawl on the ground in February and look up to see their flowers. It's cold in Connecticut in February. I'm not crawling on the ground and looking underneath the leaves of a plant to see if it's doing its thing. It just was it was so counterintuitive to me. Now I'll say breeding, particularly from Hans Hansen out in Michigan, associated with Walter's Gardens, breeding on hellebores has really come a long way. There's a lot of hellebores now that their blossoms face upwards and not down. And they also tend to float above the foliage up top. So you really get that extra impact. Which I love. Like, I think that that's really great. And because there's been that gateway and that entryway into these new hellebores now that are a little more showy, I've come to appreciate all the other things about hellebores that I just kind of swept under the rug. They're deer resistant. They're drought tolerant. They do really, really well in difficult situations like deep, dense, dry shade. There's not a whole lot that looks good then. And I've learned to put up with the things that I don't like about them, which in particular, they have to get the ugly haircut basically, because if you're in colder regions, the foliage, the evergreen foliage desiccates, it browns out, and usually you need to do a pretty stern cutback on them in late spring after the flowering's all over. But I would say that the hellebore that is responsible for my turnaround was Spanish Flare hellebore, and that's Helleboris Spanish Flare. It's zones 4 to 9, and this is just a beauty. It is butter yellow with a beautiful boss in the center of the 3-inch across blossom that is a dark burgundy color. They're star-shaped. What a unique pattern to see, and a unique color to see in the depths of February, which is when it starts blooming here in New England. It's a winter bloomer. It's considered a winter bloomer like most hellebores. It will persist and fade out as it goes to seed. It turns almost a chartreuse color like a lot of hellebores do, but it still looks as if the flowers are freeze-dried on the plant. This is not a big plant like most hellebores, 18 to 24 inches tall and wide. Really takes tough conditions, poor soil, also dry shade. I have it planted around the base of a mature oak tree, so a very thirsty tree that's stealing water, and I have a beautiful, beautiful spreading mound of hellebores now, so Spanish Flare. It's really, really lovely. On my list, this is part of the honeymoon series, Spanish Flare is. So the honeymoon series of hellebores, if you've been a hellebore hater in the past, I would say that this is a good series to tap into. There's multiple different jewel tone colors. The one that's on my list for this year, and we'll throw a photo of it up in the show notes, is French Kiss, which normally I'm not into pink, but it's a pink, white, burgundy, starish looking blossom to it. And it's dark, it's moody, it's interesting, it's very jewel-like. I have it on my list. It's actually in my shopping cart online right now, so I plan to dip back in and give my Spanish Flare a couple of partners, if you will, with French Kiss. So used to be a hater of hellebores, now I'm kind of a lover of them. Carol, I feel like you've always been a lover of hellebores.
I do love hellebores, okay. Even the ones that face down, because it's just they bloom at such an exciting time.
True.
Right? It's like nothing else really, maybe some like early snowdrops or daffodils, and hellebores, which look so different.
True.
I do love them. Place
them in an area in which you can see them easily if there's 5 feet of snow outside, so...
Yes. And I found, I thought you had to cut back the old foliage before they started blooming. But one year I was lazy and didn't do it, and they did better than ever. So it's not a have to type of thing. It's more of a want to.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So I'm going to guess that hellebore was not you used to not entirely love. What was your next didn't really, invite it to the party plant?
Okay, this one I literally didn't invite to the party. So, and I have talked, again, longtime listeners have heard about this one before because I have talked about it, but It's my PG hydrangea.
You have to love that thing. You basically gave yourself back surgery trying to save that. You have to love it now.
I do love it, but it's funny. So there's this hydrangea paniculata grandiflora, zones 3 to 8. 10 to 15 feet tall and wide, full sun to partial shade. Okay, yeah. PG hydrangea. I think a lot of people recognize this plant. Mm-hmm. This was pretty much the only thing going on in my yard when we bought the house. And I literally had a friend who saw it and go, that's kind of random hydrangea, like in this disparaging tone. And I was like, okay. I thought I kind of liked it, but I don't know. But I'm definitely going to keep it. And then it came down in an October snowstorm, which weighted down the blooms, and it fell onto its side. And so I pruned it, and my husband helped me stand it back up again. And then I was all in on the PG hydrangea.
If you go to that amount of effort for a plant, it has to be invited back to the party.
Absolutely. And it did look great. After that pruning, it really spruced it up. And it re-rooted, and it has been just effortless joy ever since. The flowers are the main attraction. They emerge in the second half of summer. They start out green, and then they go white, and then around the first day of school, they start to go pink, and they get pinker and pinker and pinker until the frost, and they turn tan. And so we have lots of first day of school pictures of my precious child standing in front of the precious hydrangea tree. The neighbors call it the pom-pom tree. Apparently, the woman that owned the house before us used to give out the flowers, or tell certain people that they could cut the flowers. It's tall enough so that like the deer can't reach it anymore. The deer will eat hydrangeas, any kind of hydrangeas, panicle, whatever, but they can't reach most of it, so we don't have deer problems with it anymore. It's like I think when we talked about it before, you mentioned that it's sort of a traditional New England churchyard plant or cemetery plant.
It is. It is. But you know what? And especially the history that it has, you look at some of these aged trees and they are trees. I mean, they get to be trees. They will get very, very, trunks that you could just hug. They're so massive. But yeah, you just look at that and that plant has history,
Yes.
Prior to even your mitigation efforts to keep it alive. I mean, that tree probably had 50 years of history prior to that, which is so, so cool. And I think, definitely big gold star for that. But it's hard, right? I feel a lot of us have these certain feelings about plants that we maybe inherited on the property that we moved to. And that's a perfect example, Carol, of telling people when you move in, sit with something for a while. Don't just come in and raise the yard and cut everything and pull everything out that, you kind of feel some sort of way about, because you might learn to love it in the end. So
yes. And I have planted around it, and it doesn't look so random anymore. So I put a photo in the show notes, which puts it, you can see the hydrangea, and the context of the garden is not the only thing going on anymore. And so, I felt like I've got to meet it halfway. If it's going to go to all this work to look great, I need to make it not look random. Right?
I love it. Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so maybe here we go to a lot of gardens, right? You see a lot of PG hydrangeas in a lot of the gardens that we go to. When I first started at fine gardening nearly 2 decades ago, honeysuckles were all the rage. And I could not stand them because you would show up at a garden to scout it, to take photos of it, and inevitably it would be in peak season, which would be June, July, August, and these vines growing up this beautiful gate would be covered in powdery mildew and just ruined the shot left and right. And it just was, I just couldn't get my head around why people would plant honeysuckle. I get that it's maybe a pass-along plant or a childhood memory plant where, you take the blossom and you drink the little honey out of the blossom or whatever. I a few years later learned that these are Japanese honeysuckles. These are Lonicera japonica honeysuckles that were all the rage in the late 90s and early 2000s. You could not go to a garden center or nursery and not see an entire swath of these plants that did look great, granted, for about 2 weeks in May. And then you got them home and you planted them. And if there was any sort of humidity or inconsistent water, or the conditions wherever across the country were a teensy bit humid, these things got completely covered in powdery mildew, which then made them susceptible to insects moving in and just decimating these vines. And everybody said, oh, don't worry. Well, you cut it back and it looks great the next spring. For 2 weeks, and then it looked like holy hell again. So I stayed away from honeysuckle when I planted my yard, and I didn't want a honeysuckle. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I discovered Lonicera sempervirens, which is the native honeysuckle and does not get powdery mildew. We, in the last few years, have tended to have very hot and humid summers here in New England. To the point where my mother-in-law, who lives in Florida, was like, wow, you guys are really humid up there. If someone from Florida is commenting on your humidity, it's been humid. I now have several varieties of Lonicera sempervirens. The native one I've mentioned before in the past is Major Wheeler, which is a red blooming trumpet honeysuckle. That's its common name. But today I'm going to talk about its Lonicera sempervirens sulphura, which is yellow trumpet honeysuckle. I bought this 3 years ago to be a companion to my red blooming Major Wheeler. It grows along a fence that actually encompasses my vegetable garden. I also got Mandarin, which is an orange. So if anybody is more of an orange person, that's a really great cultivar. But today I want to talk about the yellow because holy macaroni, 3 years in, this thing was gangbusters this year. Not a stitch of powdery mildew, not an aphid to be found, but absolutely covered in blooms, probably mid-May into early June. You'll see the photo in the show notes. You can't see foliage on this vine because it's that covered in these yellow tubular flowers. Misnomer. Hummingbirds don't need red flowers only to feed. They like all sorts of flowers that are trumpet shaped and provide nectar. And the hummingbirds get into WrestleMania over this vine when it's in full bloom. The great thing is that I have found with most of the Lonicera sempervirens, the trumpet honeysuckles, they do a big flush of blooms in late spring. Then they sporadically bloom through the summer and into fall. Right now, I'm looking out my window and I can see that this yellow trumpet honeysuckle has a smattering of yellow blossoms on it still. So, that's pretty amazing. And you'll read about it and see that it's 8 to 12 feet tall. That it grows as tall as the structure on which you give it to grow, basically. So my fence is only maybe 5 to 6 feet tall. That's as tall as this honeysuckle's been growing. And when it starts doing those Medusa kind of tentacles, I just wrap it back around the fence. And that's probably 2 to 3 feet wide is its maximum as far as its width is concerned. It's a super well-behaved vine. I let it go. I generally don't do any pruning. You'll notice, I think it was 3 or 4 episodes ago when I talked about Major Wheeler, that red one that I I think it was 6 or 8 years in, I had to do kind of a culling out of this old, these old died back branches. But that's the only thing that I've had to do on any of these honeysuckles. And this one, because it's only 3 years old, I haven't had to do any pruning of any sort on. Just let it, set it and forget it. It's great. So I will say, used to hate honeysuckle before I realized that I didn't like Japanese honeysuckle. I really like native trumpet honeysuckle. Linicera sempervirens, can't go wrong. All right, Carol, I'm feeling like this is the positivity episode. I used to not like this person, but I came around to them in the end.
They won us over.
They won us over.
Our hearts and minds have been changed.
It is. It's the Pollyanna episode.
At least it's not the hate episode.
No.
I think we've done it. Plants we used to hate and now we used to love and now we hate. And that was easier.
Yeah, it was easier. It was easier. I mean, especially for me, Miss Negative, yeah. Salty Danielle did really well on that episode. This one, unicorns and glitter, is not my thing, but I'm trying.
All right. Well, so long time listeners will have heard me rant about catalpas. Right? So
that tree, bane of your existence.
Bane of my existence. No unicorns, no glitter. I really don't hate catalpas, but I do hate the ones that are growing right over my house. They're messy. They're enormous. They are so enormous. Branches randomly break, but not all the way. So they it's been a year that one branch has been in the process of slowly falling down, and now it's lying on the ground. It's all, it looks terrible. I've got a photo in the show notes of my horrible catalpas. They're I think southern catalpas, but I'm not sure, they might be northern catalpas. So that's my do not love. But in my travels, I discovered that there is a natural hybrid between catalpas and desert willow, which is chalopsis. And so there is such a thing called a chatalpa, which is part chalopsis and part catalpa. So I am throwing out there as something I have recently grown to love, but I haven't got it yet, but it might be in my shopping cart because proven winners will send it right to you.
Yeah.
El Nino Desert Orchid. That's Chatalpa NCXC1. But you can call it El Nino with a registered trademark symbol. And it is hardy from zones 6 to 9. So it's not super, super hardy, but it will be fine here in southern New England, probably not so much in northern New England. But what is cool about this hybrid is that it combines the best qualities of two very unique plants. So it does, first off, this in particular is a nice size compared to the parents. So it will get 10 to 15 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet wide. So more like a shrub than a tree. Chalopsis will get maybe 20 feet tall, and catalpas 80 feet tall, 60 feet tall. They just keep growing and growing and growing. So that's the first winning quality that I really love about this. And it has the one thing you can't complain about with catalpas is the flowers. They have these gorgeous orchid-like flowers, lots and lots of them for kind of a brief period in spring. And they look great until they start raining down on your roof and your deck and your patio and your lawn and everything you own in your car. And if you don't blow them away right away, they stick to everything. If it rains, forget it, right? But if it's only 10 to 15 feet tall, the flowers are just unbridled joy. A beautiful, warm violet color, and ruffly and fragrant, and the butterflies love it, and just amazing.
I would
right?
think
And
the
great at eye
hummingbirds
level.
too, because it's got kind of that tubular, it's a blunt tube, but it's a tubular flower.
Yeah, I bet you're right. I bet that the hummingbirds would be interested. And also the other thing is that it flowers in late spring to early summer depending where you are, and it may sporadically rebloom for the rest of the summer.
Nice.
Which is cool because that's something that a catalpa does not do. You only get that brief window of time. Actually, frankly, thankfully for the catalpas. But a rebloom, I mean, hey, that's fantastic. The foliage looks more like desert willow than catalpa. So it's narrow, linear, very attractive, sort of a medium green. And so the plant looks good even when it's not in bloom. And it's sort of just got a nice tidy look. And the habit is sort of rounded. It can be trained to have a single stem, so it'd be like a sort of a standard look. And you don't really need to do much to maintain that shape. It blooms on new wood, so any pruning or shaping that you want to do would happen in early spring, like right when the new growth is emerging, but really you don't need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I might found something that I refuse to plant anything in the catalpa genus, like even the pretty gold-leafed ones. But this, I think I will plant.
For anyone who's not just listening, but you're watching this on YouTube right now, Carol adjusted her camera so we can kind of see outside the window there. And the entire time that you were talking bad about the catalpa, I was ready for like a branch to come crashing down in the window. like it said, you know what, you, and just like dropped a branch. So that did not happen. But hey, if you're listening and you'd like to see if a branch falls down during this episode, go to Fine Gardening's YouTube page and watch the video of this podcast, because we never know. We've got another 20 minutes. It might happen.
It might happen, but boy, it is a slow process. It doesn't just drop a branch. It thinks about it for a year.
It's like this ornery old man. Like that's what I'm getting in my head right now. Well, so this is very interesting that you mentioned this plant, Carol, because our expert, who will be coming up a little bit later, did a plant profile on desert willow for Fine Gardening recently. So I know that he rants about something else. This was not a plant that was on his, because apparently he doesn't feel as passionately about catalpas as you do. But he wrote about it, loved it, and it's somebody we really respect their opinion. So I think like you can't go wrong with that plant, and that's a really good pivot for away from catalpas. Now I know, like if I want to get you fired up, I'll just be like, catalpa. Oh my goodness. All right, so my next used to hate it, didn't love it, was because everyone always warned me off of Japanese anemones. So anemone japonica and CVS, any of the cultivars of it. And that's just because I think historically they've been super, super thuggish. If a Japanese anemone is happy, it will take over. It has moderately interesting foliage, kind of almost palmate leaves that are bright Kelly green, around 2 feet tall and wide. However, I think they spread by stolons. Don't take my word for it, but really, really massively spread out and go bananas. So if you've got a Japanese anemone, you probably have a whole entire embankment of Japanese anemone, which is too bad because they really are beautiful. Just such a delicate bloom that comes up on a very, very thin stem. It's that classic, if a little kid did a drawing of a flower shape, 4 petals, 5 petals, I believe, with a nice yellow anther stamen to the middle. It comes in a variety of colors, pink, white, lighter, paler pastel colors. spring blooming, some fall blooming. If you get the spring blooming ones, here's the other thing. 2 seconds. They bloom for 2 seconds. I mean, I love that all the descriptions are like, oh, it's a great cut flower. I'm like, cut flower? By the time I got out there to look at them, the flowers were gone. Do love the fall blooming Japanese anemones though, because they really do put on a show at a time when not much else is going on. But I never wanted to risk it because of that thuggish nature. Lots of hybridization going on with these Japanese anemones to extend their blooming and to curb their aggressive, thuggish habits. And one that I've just been eyeballing forever that I will make the jump for is Wild Swan. And that's the trademark name. Now, here we go. It is MACANE001 is its actual cultivar name. This is going to be zone 6 to 8, 6 to 9. I'm giving it all up for this bloom because it's so beautiful. So the Wild Swan stays more contained. It's going to be 16 to 18 inches tall and wide. It is not a runner. It stays a little more well-behaved, but it sends up that stem and then it blooms this white, beautiful, pure white blossom with a yellow stamen, but the back side of the petals are blue. Blue, people, blue. I mean, gorgeous. On first blush, if you saw it from, the backside or the undersides, and the flowers will, kind of move around depending on the path of the sun, phytotropic, right? And if you saw it on the backside, you would think that it was a blue poppy because it has that same shape and that same kind of beautiful color. It's maybe a little bit darker of a blue, but gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. Does not reseed. Perfect for a partially shaded area. Excellent cut flower because extended bloom period. Blooms in the spring, then sporadically blooms in the summer, then puts on another bit of a show in the fall. Holy macaroni. I'm in. I'm totally in because they've solved all the problems that I didn't love about a standard straight species Japanese anemone with this cultivar white swan, or wild swan, excuse me. I keep wanting to say white swan, but it's wild swan. And there is a lot of breeding work that's been done on these anemones. And I think I need to dip a little bit further into the pool as well, because I think in fall, this is kind of an invaluable perennial that really, if it was well behaved and it was, sterile, didn't reseed, didn't spread massively, that there's a lot of places in my garden that I could use a fall pop of color with. So yeah, and that's Wild Swan, Japanese anemone. I came around to it. Okay, Carol, bring it on home. Who have you found a new love for?
So this is one that is taken for granted and like everyone knows it and but marigolds. This is another one that I hadn't really I did plant them in my veggie garden back again in the 90s because everyone's oh yeah, it keeps the nematodes away from your tomatoes or something like that. There was some old wives' tale about marigolds. So that would be the only reason I would plant them. And I would never, this is the plant that the second grade teacher gave everybody one seed and we planted it
in my gosh, in the Dixie carton. Cups.
Yes. Yes. And then you bring it home to your mom for Mother's Day or something and still one flower on it. But, it's almost too easy to grow from seed or, it's it's in the parking islands and, it's just people are so used to marigolds and you think of it as nothing special. But I got, again, this is another All America Selections seed packet that I got was for Super Hero Spry French marigold. So that's Tajides, Tajides patula Super Hero Spry. It's an annual, although I think I saw that it is, hardy in zones 8 to 10, but not super long lived. So it really wouldn't count as a perennial, I don't think. It was a 2018 AAS flower winner, introduced by Ernst Bennery of America, which Bennery is like the Bennery giant zinnias.
Yeah, zinnias. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, a lot of really cool work with seeds and like genetics of flowering annuals. It's very compact. It only gets 10 to 12 inches tall and wide. But if you plant a bunch of them together, it sort of forms a cool little low-growing ground cover. Likes full sun, well-drained soil. It's very drought tolerant. It's very heat tolerant. And it's the colors of the flower. So it has, the French marigolds are very small flowers, maybe an inch across, and these are bicolored. So the center is golden yellow, and the outer perimeter petals are like a beautiful, rich, like velvety dark red.
Ooh, Merlot.
Yeah, burgundy. Yeah.
Yeah. Red wine. We're getting into the fall, people. I'm starting to think about red wine.
Very French, right?
Love it.
Yes. And the foliage is super clean and attractive. It's like there's nothing that bothers it. Deer, rabbits, rodents, nothing bothers marigolds. And that is a super big selling point.
Huge.
Yeah. And it does actually, it looks cute as a cut flower, lasts forever. You can gather seeds from it. It comes pretty true from seed, although, it is, I have definitely grown it from seed, and the offspring look the same as the parents. I mean, I don't know why, but I was like, thought myself too sophisticated to plant marigolds, but it's a beautiful, beautiful little plant. So like, why not?
Yeah, and I think too, marigolds, especially the blooms, come in such a different variety of shapes, the ones that you have in your mind of those giant puffballs that, sit on these little short stems that, sorry, people who love Disney World, but Disney World plants in mass, I don't think, there's this other whole world to this, group of plants that have more delicate blooms and some more sophisticated blossom colors and that sort of thing too. However, those white puffball marigolds, I'm never going to love them. They just look like dirty tissues matted up
immediately. And you know what? Deer they'll eat just the flowers off those.
Really?
I tried Kilimanjaro white a couple years ago, and it's just did get flowers, and then the next day the deer just took them right off.
No way. They love those wadded up wet tissue.
Right? It was actually doing me a favor.
Seriously. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, so I think I'm going to get more hate mail on this, but I used to dislike lavender. and just a whole hog. And it wasn't that I dislike lavender. I think if I lived in an area to which I do not live, I live in New England, and grew lavender, if I was out on the West Coast, if I was in a more Mediterranean climate, if I had the conditions that were conducive to lavender and it looking good for extended periods of time, I think I would love lavender, but I don't have those conditions. We tend to have wet winters here, which lavender completely resents wet winters, tends to rot out. The other thing that tends to happen is people get sucked into traditional English lavender, which I can understand, but Lavandula angustifolia gets really gangly, really woody, and requires a PhD to properly renovate prune when it gets to that really woody point. I don't have time for that, people. Like, I have enough woody plants that require a lot of pruning and a lot of primping. I don't have time for that when it comes to a perennial, a sub-shrub, if you will. So I kind of have stayed away from lavender. Carol, you had given me some lavender cuttings years ago that have done better, but still kind of woody. It's 3 or 4 years later now. And the one lavender that I've now made an exception for came to us as a sample plant. I tried to track this down, folks. I think it was 2018, 2019. It was definitely pre-pandemic, so this has been a while now, 6 or 7 years. And it's Sweet Romance English Lavender. I believe that this is a Proven Winners plant. Today's episode is not sponsored by Proven Winners, but it just so happened to be the case. And this is zones 4 to 9. I've started experimenting with lavenders. If we were given a sample plant, I was ready, willing, and able, let me chuck it in there. And a lot of the breeding efforts on lavenders have been to make them more winter hardy to winter wet, to extend their bloom period. And the other end of that, ironically, is to make them more heat tolerant so they didn't kind of blow out of bloom so quickly in warmer areas. And this Sweet Romance has done just that for me. So it's got an adorable little habit. We're 6 years in. I haven't pruned it other than just the, clean up cut back of the, herbaceous foliage in spring. I haven't pruned it once. It is not getting this woody, gangly stem. It's staying more, almost like a suckering multi-stem shrub, if you will. Really nice, about 14 inches by maybe 16 inches, a little wider than it is tall. Starts blooming around Mother's Day, maybe a little bit later than that, late May, early June. Sporadic, it's kind of doing its thing. It's kind of revving up. Hit July, it's in full bloom. And a little bit darker bloom to it. Very English lavender, nothing special there. But I have photos in the show notes that I took a week ago. So the end of September, middle of September, we'll just say September. And this plant is still blooming and looks beautiful. And the blooms that have gone by aren't that dusty, grayed out kind of oatmeal color, gruel color. They actually maintain quite a nice purple hue when the blooms have actually gone by. So you'll look at the plants and say, oh, that it's covered in blooms. Well, actually, most of those blooms aren't actively new blossoms anymore, but they're just kind of freeze dried on the plant as the seed heads go. It's just a really great plant. We've had some wet winters. The past couple have been dry, so stay tuned. But it's been 6 or 7 years now, and this lavender is really holding up its end of the bargain for being a better habit, having a longer bloom time, doing well in our significantly hotter summers, and not heaving itself all out of the ground and getting all rotten when we've got a wet winter that we've had 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, I'm all in now on lavenders. I'm coming around, especially to Sweet Romance, and I feel like that's the perfect name to end our unicorns and glitters episode. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about, plants that were so common he used to hate them, but has come around.
Ah yes, plants I used to hate, but now love. I'll admit it, I've been a bit of a snob in my gardening days. I used to turn up my nose at things like daylilies. Too predictable, I thought. Everyone's got them, including the Home Depot parking lot. And they just bloom, they fade, and you move on. Where's the drama? Where's the excitement? I wanted fireworks in the borders, not a dependable little ho-hum show every July. But here's the thing. You spend a few decades tending soil, fighting off slugs, dragging hoses around in the heat, and you start to see predictability in a different light. A daylily may be common, but by heavens it's common because it works. Year after year, it comes back without complaint. Doesn't fuss about the weather, doesn't sulk when you forget to deadhead it. You begin to realise that reliability is not boring at all. It's heroic. It's the same with ferns. I used to groan at the sight of another green mound. How unoriginal, I thought. Then I watched a lady fern in a friend's garden shrug off drought, shade, neglect, and even a marauding dog. There it was in September, still looking as fresh as if it had been groomed by the Queen's gardener himself. Suddenly, the humble fern looked a lot less dull and a lot more like a champion. So yes, I've come to love the plants I once dismissed. Predictability isn't a flaw, it's a gift. These are the stalwarts, the old friends who'll stick by you no matter what horticultural chaos you've created elsewhere. And if that makes me a convert to the so-called boring plants, well, I'll gladly wave the flag. Because in the end, it's not about impressing anyone. It's about filling the garden with plants that stay the course. And I, for one, am grateful for every bloom of those dependable daylilies.
Carol, I love that Peter went in on daylilies because I actually was going to talk about I really used to not love daylilies and I'm starting to come around to them.
I still don't like them. I'm sorry. That is what I don't hate them, but I don't love them.
I'm going to have Peter give you a call. All right, while I get on the phone with Peter, let's see what our expert from the South has to talk about. Oh, sweet gum trees. Apparently there's a story here. Let's see what our expert has to say. Well, I'm super excited today because we have an expert guest from the southern regions of our glorious North American continent. Guest, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Jason Reeves. I'm the horticulturist for the University of Tennessee Gardens in Jackson, Tennessee. And it's great to be with you this morning. The university has 3 gardens, one located in kind of each region of the state of Tennessee. And I'm located about halfway between Memphis and Nashville. And we're in zone 7, 7B, depending who you listen to and who you believe. And you can also follow me on my Facebook page. It's Jason Reeves, the dash symbol in the garden. And so, yeah, it's good to be with you this morning.
Jason, I'm so excited to see you. It's been so long since we've seen each other in person, and I just have to give an extra plug to the gardens in Jackson. That was one of the most seminal experiences I had when I was first at Fine Gardening. I came down, I visited you. I think I was down around this time of year because you were getting ready for your big fall event in the garden at Jackson.
Yes.
What is that event called?
So it's called Fall in the Garden, and it's the first Thursday in October each year. And and this year we're going to have Bree Arthur as our guest speaker. So we're excited about that.
Oh, that's so exciting. So for anybody who's listening and is in the area, are there tickets left to the event?
Absolutely.
All right, great. And where do people go to be able to get those tickets?
Actually, you don't have to have a ticket. It is open free and for everyone, and you just show up. So UT Gardens, Jackson, Tennessee. So open and free to all.
Oh my goodness, that's so, all right, that's exciting. I mean, our listeners get very excited about free, let me tell you. Well, so I thought of you immediately, and I don't know why, but I think because you're such a positive person, you're able to put, and you were saying you're a people pleaser, you're a positive person, you're able to put a good spin on every bad plant. And that's what I remember most about you in our conversations and when we've worked together for so many years at Fine Gardening. So when the topic of plants I used to hate, but now I kind of like or love, I thought of you, and you thought of a childhood memory.
Oh my
trauma.
gosh, yes. So one of my least favorite trees, but somewhat favorite, is sweet gum. And my parents built their house on my grandparents' farm at the edge of the farm. And just across the fence on the neighbor's property was a whole row of native sweet gum. They weren't planted, they were just growing there. And all those seed pods fell into our yard. And those round prickly balls, I hate those things. You cannot play, you cannot go barefooted, you can't ride your bicycle over them. And I despise those trees. And I'm still not a fan, even though it's a native tree with that fall color, but those seed pods are, but there's some really cool cultivars now available.
And what are okay, so the other thing I will say about sweet gum, you can't go barefoot, you can't play ball, you can't do anything around. And then when you mow the lawn, it becomes like projectiles.
Yes.
You could kill somebody with those.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
But you've come around because there's some cultivars now of sweet gum that have really, upped their game. What are some of the cultivars, or maybe one cultivar that's really making you happy to welcome this tree back into your life?
Absolutely. So, I just glanced through the Dr. Michael Durr's Woody of Manual Landscape Plants this morning. There are over 60 cultivars, and this is his version, which was, 10 or 12 years ago, the latest version of
Yeah.
the manual. So I'm sure there's even more. But my favorite was discovered in Tennessee by Don Shadow, a famous nurseryman, called Slender Silhouette, and this was found in the wild. And this has been around now 20-ish years, but it's really caught on the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. And it is very tall and slender, particularly if you're growing it in the right situation, which is in leaner, drier, poorer soil. If you grow it in heavily amended or irrigated, it's going to splay a little bit, put out some branches that may splay to the side because it grows too fast. But this has become the architect's dream. Sweet gum will grow anywhere. They'll grow in the dry situation and they'll grow on the wet side. But it's really become a common plant now, particularly for landscape designs where you have to have something tall and slender.
And Jason, does Slender Silhouette still get that amazing fall color?
It varies from year to year, and I'm not sure why. Some years, we have a big one at the university here that gets fall color. Some years just mediocre. Interesting thing about it is some years it produces those seed pods, the sweet gum balls, and some years it doesn't, or it may just have a few. It never has a real heavy fruit set. And because it's straight up and down, it's slender, where do the balls fall? Right around the base. So they're easy to rake up and pick up if they're bothering you as they do me.
I love that the danger zone is a lot smaller if it's a skinny tree.
Absolutely, yes.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, I felt like that was so good because that selection came from a childhood trauma that you are now working through. I feel like this is a therapy session.
Yes.
And we've come around to the Slender Silhouette has given you peace of mind now in your adulthood.
Absolutely. On my farm, I have planted 8 of them. I have a little grove of 6, and then I have 2 others on the farm, and I have a collection actually that's lining my driveway that will eventually go to my house, a collection of tall, slender trees. And my soil's really poor there, so they're really doing great there because they are growing a little bit slower. And again, a tough tree that doesn't require really any care.
I love that. I love that. Well, and your next selection was a plant that isn't known to be tough and is known to struggle in especially warm situations. We're sitting here on the precipice of October. You just told me it's going to be 90 degrees in Tennessee today in Jackson. What was this plant that you used to not love because of its conditional issues, and now you've come around to?
Sure. So heliotrope. Heliotrope is a wonderful plant for that fragrant foliage, the beautiful blue or purple, depending on the cultivar. Great in a container. Also can use it in front of the border, but not heat tolerant in the South. And so through the years, I've been trialing plants for different companies for over 20 years now. And, every few years we would get a heliotrope. And by July, it was pretty much dead. Then maybe 5 years ago, we got one called Augusta Lavender from Proven Winners, and that thing bloomed, and it bloomed, and it bloomed, and it was fantastic. And the next spring, it came back.
What?
And it has come back again and again and again. So it is actually perennial. If you look at Plant Delights, Tony Avent's website, he's selling it as a perennial. It is listed as Zone 8 on Proven Winners site, but it's actually really a Zone 7 plant all across Tennessee, as long as it's in good draining soil. So, heliotrope, again, it wasn't heat tolerant. Now, this is a different species. Actually, it's a hybrid, but it's not fragrant like the traditional heliotrope.
Okay.
And so, but beautiful blue flowers. The bees love it. Ends up being 12 to 18 inches tall. Again, a perennial in zone, I would probably say, safe to say 7B. Does die to the ground, comes back in the spring. Good drainage is important. Very heat and drought tolerant compared to past heliotropes.
Now, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I know, for us growing heliotrope up here, obviously not the hybrid that you're talking about, has that rough, leathery leaf and tends to then be a little more deer and bunny resistant, herbivore resistant. What's the foliage like on this hybrid?
It is definitely rough and kind of pubescent. I haven't had a deer or rabbit problem, although, we do have a rabbit problem here at the gardens. Don't have so much of a deer problem, but it is definitely that kind of rough sandpapery like feel to it. So I would assume it would be similar to the other species and hybrids of it. And then, most exciting, even more exciting, I guess, last year we were sent another one from Proven Winner called Aromagica. I love the way they play off these names. Aromagica Purple. And it is fragrant, and it made it through the summer last year. And so we have it in the garden again this year, and it looks great. And it is fragrant. Now, I don't think it's probably as strong as it would be for you, because some fragrance has to do with temperatures. We do get that fragrance, but you got to be fairly close to it. And I do think at different times of the day it's more fragrant than others, and that's true for lots of plants. But it is heat tolerant. It's dark color. It is truly an annual. It does not come back. And again, it's a hybrid as well, but you can tell it's more of the traditional type heliotrope with that beautiful fragrance.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, I'm going to have to look up both of those. Probably not perennial for me. I'd have to treat them both as annuals, but
yes.
I do love heliotrope. I mean, that is a classic favorite. Okay, I'm nervous to step into this next plant, but but I think that you have a good spin and a good take on it, and everyone just, gird your loins. We're going to talk about a plant that traditionally could be a little thuggish, but Jason's got a good spin on it. And what's that plant, Jason?
So it's Ajuga, and Ajuga, yes, in some parts of the country it can be, I guess, a little more spreading than you would like. For us in the South, it's really not that big a deal. I guess maybe it depends where you live. We do have a few fungal issues that kind of keep it under control. If you get a big patch, it can melt out in the center. But for me, I guess I've always had Ajuga around, but it never was a wow. It's like, it's just, it's there. It's okay. But oh my gosh, Chris Hansen at Garden Solutions, which is, he's headquartered just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, has selected all these cultivars and bred different cultivars for this really unique foliage. We've had black scallop and chocolate chip around, and they're cool, but these are really, really cool. And so they're in the Feathered Friends series. I love Chris comes up with these cool series of plants. And I think there's 7 in this series now. And pretty much all of them have small to medium-sized leaves. None of them are large leaf. And they really vary in color from chartreuse to dark purple. And there's even one that has pink flowers called Flamingo. Has a pink flower to it. So Flashy Flamingo, I believe is the name of it. And Flashy it has yellow foliage with those pink flowers. So it's really cool to have the pink blooms. And they're slower growing because, again, they're smaller forms. They can be, I've even seen them used in containers. And also for us, sometimes they don't they struggle a little bit in full sun. These all do fine in shade to sun. Even the gold ones, there's several gold ones, they don't burn. So I'm really excited about these new cultivars of Ajuga.
Yeah, because typically, I mean, especially for y'all down in the South, anything that's got that chartreuse, a little golden undertone, full sun is that just means burnout, baby.
Yes.
Like you get those ugly, burn tips to the plants. But this whole feathered series, say it again? It's Feathered Friends?
Feathered Friends, yes, is a series. And there's really cool names like Cordial Canary and Noble Nightingale and Petite Parakeet and so Fierce Falcon. So anyway, I love the names as well, and they're all unique in their own way. And I love we actually grow them for our plant sales, and you can order them from them, and you can get a selection. I guess it's wholesale, but you can get like a tray that has all the different cultivars in there, and they're kind of cool growing together, kind of mix and mingling the different colors and leaf patterns.
You get like a menagerie of birds in your garden. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that so much.
Yes. So,
well, and you brought up a good point too, that, plants that can traditionally be a bit more, thuggish, a little bullish, when you go into the variegations, when, the foliage colors change out, that can really limit the amount of chlorophyll that's being taken in by the plant. And a lot of times you end up with like a variegated version of a thuggish plant that, you kind of wish would be a bit more thuggish because they're so much slower growing.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think they've come a long way, and Chris does such amazing work with different plants there in Michigan, and introducing us to some really cool plants that maybe don't make it by the big guys, but he's a great guy.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, you have given us three, hit it out of the ballpark there, Jason. Three amazing plants that are, you didn't used to love, but now you found new affection for. There's a positive spin instead of saying the word hate.
Absolutely. Yes.
Amazing. Well, best of luck with your big fall event. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
It was great being here and joining you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
I love that this ended up almost being a therapy episode, Carol, where like you worked out your frustrations and feelings around catalpa. Jason worked out his feelings and frustrations about his childhood with sweet gums. I mean, we've come a long way. What did I work out? I worked out something. Oh, my feelings about hellebores. I'm now a hellebore lover. I mean, this was therapy. We should be charging by the hour for this.
Oh, but it's free. So that's even better.
Free therapy, people. Tune in next time for our next session when we talk about childhood trauma. No, just kidding.